T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have...
From its first flight in 1981 till its final landing in 2011, the Space Shuttle was the backbone of the American space program. Built upon the experience gained from Apollo, and with the goal of making a reusable spacecraft, NASA accomplished a feat that most thought was impossible. 5 complete shuttle systems were built and completed 135 missions to low Earth orbit. They conducted science experiments, deployed and fixed the Hubble Space Telescope, and helped to build the International Space Station, which is in healthy operation still. Using Kerbal Space Program, we'll take a deep dive into each mission, looking at the crew, payload, and mission objectives. Join us on this walk through history. And hey, you just might learn something. I'm Sears JT, and this is Project STS. STS-41-B, Space Shuttle Challenger, launched February 3rd, 1984, 1 p.m. UTC or 6 a.m. Eastern, and it was 3 months after STS-9. So about 3-month thing is about the cadence we're at this point. That will sort of change once Discovery comes into duty and after 51L. It flew to a perigee of 166 miles, apogee of 171, although they tweaked that a little bit on orbit, and I'll talk about that. Normal inclination 28.5. So you must be asking, okay, we just did STS-9. What happened to 10, 11, or even 12? You know, this one did have an internal designation of STS-11, but the NASA at the time wanted a better numbering system because they wanted to launch the shuttle a lot. So they want a better numbering scheme to where you could look at the mission number, get some context off the number without having to know some extra details about the launch. Because if somebody says STS-8, it's like, okay, when did that launch? Where did it launch from? What did it do? That kind of thing. They wanted a new numbering system to better kind of give some idea of what the mission was. So STS, pretty standard space transportation system. They didn't change that. The 41B though. So I said this launched in 1984. So the 4 in the 41B denotes the year it was launched in. You might ask, what happens when they get to 1994? I don't know. The numbering system I don't think got that far. But so 4 designates the last digit of the year it launched. So 1984, this one would be 4. The 1 in the mission number stands for launching from KSC. If they ever got Vandenberg up and running, there would have been a 2. And I don't think they were planning on launching from anywhere else. So it would either been the 1 or the 2. And then B stands for designates the launch that year. And then your next question is, where's A? Since 1984, we're launching in February. We're 3 months after STS-9. How does that work? So it's kind of weird how they set it up. The USA's fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th of the. So in October of 1983 till September of 1984 designates the fiscal year for the U.S. Now, if we go 3 months prior from February, you basically include STS-9. So if they did the numbering then, STS-9 is technically STS-40, or I guess it would be 41A, because even though it's in 1983, it's in the 84 fiscal year. So that's kind of the background of the number itself. So also why they wanted to change it, because there was a running joke that the NASA administrator at the time, James Beggs, had. I need to make sure I say this correctly. Triskaidekaphobia, which is fear of the number 13. He didn't want an STS-13, or so they said. So as I mentioned, they stuck with this numbering system through 51, through 51, so 1985. Then Challenger happened. They kind of rethought a lot of that, so then they reverted back on, I didn't write it down, but I think it was STS-32. I think, or was it 26? I don't know. I'm going to probably get that wrong. It's either 26 or 32. They reverted back to this normal numbering system. The other problem with this new numbering system was that stuff launched out of order, because numbers were designated when the mission was planned, not when the mission was launched. So, we'll get to it later on, but there were some, especially in the 51s, stuff launched out of order that was designated that should have launched before it. And so, I'm like, okay, why have this numbering system if it actually doesn't help you make sense of anything? So, STS-26. Okay, thank you, Thomas. I don't know why I was thinking 32, but thank you. And the numbering system in general doesn't really matter either, because some examples, STS-94 launched 2 years before 93. Also, there was a 41-G, but no E or F after D. So, stuff gets canceled, stuff gets shifted around, launch dates move. It happens. So they're like, screw it, number whatever you want, we don't care. So that's kind of everything about the mission number. I'll talk a little bit more about what's in the payload bay, what the crew, who the crew is, and stuff like that once we get up on the way to space. So let me get the proper crew in there. Advance. L. Gibson. And I believe McNair rides in the mid deck. Is he right down there? I didn't write down the seat arrangements. I probably should. Vance D. Brand, Robert L. Gibson, Bruce McCandless, Robert L. Stewart, Ronald E. McNair. Okay. That is everybody. Okay, make a marker right here. Boom. Okay. Crew is in. Shuttle is ready. Roll her on out. 41-B heading out to the pad. Ready. So I think STS-41-B is ready for launch.
T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. We have a go for main engine start. 6, 5. We have main engine start. 3, 2, 1, 0. We have solid rocket booster ignition and liftoff of Challenger and the 10th Space Shuttle flight. And the shuttle has cleared the tower. Tower, switch program.
Oh.
Now controlling. Roll maneuver confirmed.
15 seconds.
Good roll confirmed by mission control.
Okay, I lied. Alrighty, we're on our way. I'll have to try and clean that up a little bit, but... Okay, we're on our way up. I'll talk about the crew, since I forgot to generate them earlier. Commanding this mission is Vance D. Brand. We saw him on STS-5, where he was also commander, so this is his second shuttle mission. The pilot is Robert L. Gibson. We'll talk about him in a second. He's quite the badass himself. Bruce McCandless, the second, Robert L. Stewart, and Ronald E. McNair are the 3 mission specialists on this mission. As we look at each of their backgrounds, we'll see why they're the mission specialists are on this mission. So getting back to Vance D. Brand, like I said, we saw him in STS-5. He flew in the Air Force program as a test pilot for Lockheed Martin. Selected as part as astronaut class 5. Among those were also Swigert, Hayes, Engel, Evans, so he's been around for a little while. His first space flight was on Apollo-Soyuz, and after 5 and 41-B, he would also go on to commander one more shuttle mission. So we'll see Vance again. Next up is the pilot, Robert L. Gibson. He's a Navy pilot with over 6,000 hours of flight time. and he's a graduate of Top Gun. So he's like basically the Tom Cruise right now of this mission. He was involved in the test evaluation in getting the F-14 up and running before joining NASA. And Charles Bolden, who I think he's been a support crew or something before, but he would go on to co-pilot 61C. But he said Bolden and John Young are two of the best pilots he's flown with. He says like a lot of people just get into planes, but Bolden and Young basically wear the airplane, meaning they're one with the craft. And I'm not pitching over as much as I should. Oh, has to reset. And Gibson was selected as part of astronaut Group 8, which we're going to see a lot of Group 8 astronauts. A lot of Group 8 astronauts. Get pitched over a little bit. We're getting a little bit far out from our apoapsis. Let's catch on back up to it. So we're on to the mission specialist, the first being Bruce McCandless II, also Navy pilot, 5,200 hours-ish of flight experience. He's the youngest member of Group 5, the same that Brand came from. He was, I believe, in his upper 20s when he graduated as part, or was selected as part of Group 5. It's kind of crazy. Due to his more scientific background, he was treated as a science astronaut. So he was kind of picked on, kind of looked down part of the rest of the group. You know, it's like, oh, he's the science guy. But he was the Apollo 11 Capcom during launch and the first moonwalk. So he got to hear the first words from the moon. He was also support crew in Capcom 14 and Capcom of Skylab 3 and 4. So he's got mission control experience for sure. And he worked on MMUs and chose to go that route with the MMUs because that would actually get him into space faster. Because he was looked at as a science astronaut, so he figured I'll lean into the science thing, work on the MMUs, and that will get me to space quicker. Next is Robert L. Stewart, test pilot for the Army. He helped develop flight control systems in helicopters, and he also helped develop the system that would go on to be used in the Black Hawk helicopter. Stewart also helped develop the flight control systems for STS-1, so that's what he was his background was in. He also worked on the abort procedures, payload coordination. He was support crew in STS-4 and Capcom for STS-5. But also quite experienced at this point before being selected for this mission. Last but not least is Ronald E. McNair. He's actually the second African American to fly in space after Bluford that we saw earlier. He was a physicist from MIT, working specifically with lasers. So he was quite the smart guy. Worked on a lot of systems for previous shuttles as well. And unfortunately, this would be his only ride into space, because he was also selected part of the crew of 51L. And if you don't know what STS-51L is, I suggest go doing some reading on that. And at this point, I usually mention support crew, but they stopped listing the support crew on these missions. I searched through NASA archives, even like Wikipedia didn't have it. The other weird space shuttle resources I found didn't have it either. So I don't know who the support crew is on this one. Maybe we'll see later on the list if they did Capcom or whatever for previous missions, but I could not find who was support crew on this mission, or the next one for that matter. I don't know if that's going to be a reoccurring thing, but we may not get support crew names from here on out. The rest of the stuff is payload details and stuff like that, but I'll talk about that once we get into orbit. Miko in 3, 2, 1. We have Miko. Okay, zero that out, execute. Okay. Well, that's doing its thing. Let's open up little fuel tanks. STS-41 Challenger, you would go for ET-SEP. Roger that. ET-SEP. Confirmed? Yeah, okay. Separating away from internal tank. That never gets old. I love that. Turn the lights. Caleb Bay open. All right, let's get. So now we can talk about the payload, which, from a actually what it's carrying point of view, it's not very exciting. You've seen these before. Which Snackless, I'm starting to use yours because yours are smaller than mine and they fit tighter. So it's 2 communication satellites, Westar 6 for Western Union, and Palapa B2 for Indonesia, which I forget which. I think it was 7 launched Palapa B1. So Indonesia's 2nd satellite went up with this mission. Also, you notice we are carrying the SPAS again, which you also recognize from STS-7. It took those really cool pictures, about 300 meters, I think it was, from STS-7. So they brought that same thing up with them. And then up here, we have 2 MMUs, which we'll get to those. There was one other item that they brought up with them, but I'll get to that after we get the satellites deployed. That's kind of relevant to the next mission. But yeah, we'll do that after we get the 2 satellites deployed. So we'll go ahead and get, I believe it was Westar 6 was the first one. So let's go ahead and these are the same old, well, you can't really see them, but they're the same old communication satellites that have been launching, the same Hughes built satellites. The first one that's kind of different will come up actually in the next mission and the mission after that. And they started doing some variation in the satellite design. And as others, these are tightly packed in there. Just like the other sets, they're spin stabilized. They have the PAM-B kick motors, which is funny. On both of these, the PAM-Ds fail to ignite, so their orbits don't get raised to geosync. So actually, we are going to fetch these satellites in a later mission, both of them, and bring them back down to Earth. I think that's the very first, that's 51A's mission, if I'm not mistaken. They go to grab these 2 exact satellites to bring them back down, because they're essentially useless in this low of an orbit. So let me check where we're at in our orbit. So we'll launch the first one at our periapsis, and do the next one at apoapsis. So let me get oriented. Just need the satellite facing prograde when it gets launched, or at least a direction that it can point prograde. Because if the PAM-Ds did ignite, and it's spin stabilized, so it needs to be, doesn't have too many gyros to be able to reorient itself once that kick motor ignites. We have Westar 6 deployment in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Satellite deployment. Doors are open. Deployed all right. Make sure you get a screenshot. Westar 6 has been deployed. I'm not going to switch to it because Kerbal did something. Well, actually, I can switch to it now just to make sure it gets stable. We'll let Westar 6 do its thing. So let's go ahead and get this warped to the other side. We'll get Palapa B2 deployed. I should also note that these satellites were deployed 8 hours after launch. So they obviously did a few orbits since the orbital period's roughly an hour and a half. So they got the satellites out pretty quickly after launch. So we'll do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Deploying Plapa B2 satellite. Sun covers are open. Hopefully the satellite is spinning. And prep for deployment. Deployment in a couple seconds. I forgot I made the times on these a little bit long because the spin takes a little bit before it gets going and then it stabilizes because it gets a little shaky, getting over 0 to 100%. And that one didn't spin either. All right. Plapa B2 deployed. Just imagine that spinning in your head. It would look a lot cooler if it was spinning, but it's not. Not even spinning. My realism. My immersion. It's all broke. Also, don't look at that Z fighting. Okay? You don't need to look at that Z fighting. It's fine. Satellites are deployed. Let me switch them, get them extended into their full configuration here. Which, there is a calc controller in this mess somewhere. Easier if I just do it this way. Boom, boom. By calc controller, I mean there's not a calc controller. I could totally lie to you guys. So as I mentioned, they have what was called the SPAS, the shuttle pallet satellite. They brought up with them. It was supposed to do similar things they did on STS-7. It was like they released it with the RMS, took pictures, ran science experiments. They also equipped it with a new thing. Was a little, like a metal alloy thing on the top. Let's see, what was it supposed to do? It was supposed to measure microgravity and operation of heat pipes in microgravity. It also include like remote sensing, mass spectrometer to measure gases around the payload bay, that's the kind of stuff. Problem was there was an electrical issue, so they decided, or there was an electrical issue with the SPAS itself, so they decided not to even mess with it. They kept it in the payload bay. They weren't able to mess around and get some cool pictures like they did in STS-7, which makes me sad. Yeah, SPAS was a no-go, so that part of the mission was scrapped. And before we get to the MMU part, I'll talk about the canisters. So obviously, the getaway canisters, which allow outside organizations to send up science experiments in the shuttle payload bay. There were 5, even though I put 6, silly me. And it was the first one from a high school. They were partnering with Utah, was it Utah State? Yeah, Utah State University, and sent up the first experiment from a high school up to space. So it was kind of cool. They were also the first shuttle to bring 6 live rats in the middeck up with them. I don't think they actually did any experiments on them, just brought them up to see how they would function in microgravity. And then last but not least, the CFES, or the continuous flow electrolysis system, which has flown many times before, and the MLR, or the monodispersed latex reactor experiment. Fancy names, and I'm sure it does a lot of cool stuff. I didn't really look up all the specifics of what those experiments did. Both of those things have flown many times, though. I've seen those names quite a few times. So that kind of brings us to the main event of this mission, or the MMUs. First use of them. Let me get the camera here. So on the 4th day of the mission, McCandless and Stewart were to get out of the airlock and operate both MMUs, and perform the first untethered spacewalk, like in their space program, with these MMUs. So, canless EVA. Okay, so now that we can actually move on with this spacewalk, so McCandless floated 320 feet away using his MMU. And while Stewart remained in here, he actually tested the foot restraint on the end of the RMS, which we'll have to transfer him over to that. So yeah, I added this seat up here to kind of mimic the foot restraint that they could attach to on the RMS. So we'll get Stewart hooked up to the foot restraint, and then we'll have McCandless do his 320 meters away. Here comes the part where I hope I don't lose him. I did do some testing with this MMU, but I didn't fully test it, so famous last words. Real quick save. Cool. Alright. So yeah, McCandless floated 320 feet away from the orbiter. So what is it, about 10? Oh, about 100 meters-ish away. Did that loose conversion in my head? You should be proud of me. So you get that that one picture of him untethered. That's pretty famous. And actually, he sued some people over. Some people have used that image without his permission. This is gonna be interesting to me get this back docked, but. They only EVA'd for like almost 3 hours. They weren't out there that long. It was mostly to make sure the MMU systems worked. The foot restraint on the RMS worked. Because that will most definitely come into play in the next mission. A lot of the operations outside of deploying the 2 satellites were for practice for 41C, which we'll see once we get into it. The one other thing in the payload that I mentioned that I didn't talk about was they had in simple terms, it was a helium balloon that would deploy from the payload bay. Once it got to a certain distance, it would inflate and become a huge balloon. They were going to use that to practice maneuvers up to it, around it, stuff like that, kind of like what they did with the SPAS and STS-7. Because they knew they were going to have to try and dock with a satellite on the next one, the Solar Max satellite. They call it the IRT, the Integrated Rendezvous Target. They called it was a pathfinder for the Solar Max mission, so they could practice rendezvous. Unfortunately, something happened where it didn't inflate correctly, so they couldn't quite see it to do their maneuvers. But there was a piece of it that was like catching the sun and stuff like that, so they were using that to kind of pseudo practice their maneuvers. I didn't quite model it here, just because it kind of didn't work. It didn't inflate properly because one of the things that the tow cables snapped. Sure, it's all still activated. I think we're good to go. Now the fun part that I always nail, right? So while this is doing this, I guess I'll talk about the mission as a whole. It was a 7-day, 23-hour, 15-minute, and 55-second flight. So missed 8 days by that much. And it ended on February 11th, 1984, which launching on, what was it, February 3rd. Kind of run the math on that. The mission patch is kind of cool. There's 11 stars in that blue area up there. And that designates that technically this mission is STS-11. I didn't talk about STS-10, did I? I didn't. Okay. Because we did STS-9, right? This one had an internal designation of STS-11, so like what happened to 10? 10 was canceled. It was supposed to carry... Actually, well, they tried multiple times to launch this payload, but it was supposed to carry I believe a Teeters satellite, the second Teeters. but there was a problem with the IUS, the initial upper stage, that they couldn't have fixed in a reasonable amount of time, so they just canceled the mission altogether. And we'll revisit that exact same thing on STS-12, or why there wasn't an STS-12 either. So yeah, the mission patch has 11 stars for STS-11. STS-10 was canceled, and they changed the numbering. It's all very confusing. Very confusing. Easton doesn't want to do things simply. Am I 30 degrees? It doesn't. Yeah, I am. Okay. Okay. Nice done. Yeah, it's a really good craft. We might actually be short. Okay. We're going back up. It's alright. I thought it'd be a lot lighter than it was. Now I know. Okay. Let's get away from these hills. Meant to say after next week. Oop. Get out and push. Get out and push, you guys. What are you guys doing? Landing. Hey, fishing ain't easy. What's going on, dude? Have you gone stir crazy yet? Trash car. Oh wait, this is an ESA racing team. Alright, let's see if I can find a nice flat spot here. Oh, right there. Gear down. Come on. Contact. A little bit hard contact. And, oh, we almost killed that grass right there. And we're down. Doing the shuttle bounce. There we go. Yeah, that was STS-41-B.